My name is Teresa Dremetskas. I have been formally trained as a physician. I've been working for the Center for Victims of Torture for the last 25 years, and presently I'm the program manager at CCVT.
My name is Brian Brenny. I'm the coordinator of refugee programs here at the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto.
My name is Branka Edgic. I am the manager of health equity with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Mental health is influenced by a range of social, biological and psychological factors that interact with each other. Pre-migration factors refer to situations or events they experience in their countries of origin, events that happen during their escape. Post-migration factors, events or experiences that happen in the new country. Migration factors that include often traumatic events do affect people's mental health, ability to speak language, access to education, access to jobs, housing, social support, income are among the major factors that influence refugees' health and well-being.
There is a very close relation between the experience of torture and war and mental health. The basics are all disrupted. Food is not there in the same amount. Water is also not there. So that jeopardizes hygiene. Jeopardizing hygiene leads you to diseases.
The misconception is that all refugees develop some kind of mental health problems. Their reactions are usually normal reactions to abnormal situations. Refugees have the capacity and strength to deal with difficult situations, and they have extraordinary resilience. And most refugees become productive and successful members of the society. There are certain groups of refugees who are at higher risk of developing mental health problems than others. Those groups involve people who experience severe trauma, victims of torture, people who were imprisoned, people who experience severe deprivation, people who had a pre-existing mental health problems, and those who have no family or social support.
The refugee experience involves a series of situations more or less prolonged in every different case that involve fear, having to endure horrible situations, horrible trauma, horrible experiences of death and loss. Prolonged incarceration may involve malnutrition, even if the country is not a war-torn country. Torture most of the times happens during war, but there are many cases where there are countries not at war that are practicing torture, and the incarceration for prolonged periods of time in horrible situations inside the jail have detrimental effect on the health of refugees. Being in the receiving end of torture and aggression in the body leaves tremendous scars. There is an imprint of a memory in the brain that when this memory is evoked, sensations that make it difficult for the person to make the transition, that they are not anymore in that trauma stage. Imagine how difficult it is to function if you are still thinking that the trauma is happening or you haven't made that transition. People from different countries arrive in Canada in different ways. The experience is different, and the settlement, of course, is going to be different too. If somebody arrives here after spending 3 or 4 years in a refugee camp, it's prolonging the exposure to trauma. It's important to look carefully what is the luggage that the person is bringing.
Symptoms of mental disorders are the same worldwide, but how people present those symptoms are sometimes influenced by their cultural background. The most common mental disorders in refugees are anxiety, in particular post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Diagnosing mental health problems we should leave to healthcare professionals, but again keeping in mind that it is important to support people during difficult times, and it is important to encourage them to seek help.
When the trauma is going to come out, well, some people will never show it to you. How would you know? Do you need to know? Maybe they're coping. And when it comes is when it needs to be attended. By the same token, there are slight indications for people sometimes that require attention. The intrusive symptoms like always thinking repeatedly about the experience and not being able of getting out of that, having flashbacks. Flashbacks usually come because something triggers it. The boots remind me the boots of the soldiers, so I go back to the time that the soldier took my husband away. Another intrusive symptom could be nightmares. It's very frequent, nightmares. They relieve the whole thing. It's relieving the trauma in different ways, whether by thinking of it and knowing that they are thinking, but when they disconnect and it's not just thinking and they're having a flashback, it's also intrusive, right? But it's a kind of a continuous of what happened in the intrusive criteria of symptoms.
Most of the refugees that we see here through our inland support are also victims of torture. We try to connect them with support services in Toronto as quickly as possible. We had an Iranian transgendered woman come to us. She had practically no English skills at all. One of the major challenges for us when we were dealing with this refugee was trying to communicate and get close to this person so that we could better help this person settle in Canada. Try to become their best friend. And the only way that you could do that is if you really speak their language or understand a little bit about their culture that they come from. She had a lot of trauma. We were trying to get her into family counseling. The added burden on us is trying to find somebody who speaks and understands the language, but is also sensitive to the LGBT community and the issues related to being lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender. That is the major hurdle that we have to overcome.
Stigma attached to mental illness is a major barrier for people seeking help, and stigma attached to mental illness exists in each and every society. Very often they're reluctant to seek professional help because of stigma, so they would rather talk to informal sources of support first. Initially, just talking to a settlement worker or a counselor may be a good idea, and then encouraging to seek further help if it is necessary. Majority of refugees who come to Canada, even though they experienced stressful situations, recover without treatment. Supportive communities are the key and essential to refugees' well-being.
We have a lot of fear in the refugee community overall of sharing, because they don't know, is this going to be permanent or am I going to be shipped back? We have to let them feel, especially the sponsored refugees, know that they are one step much closer than the inland claimants to being a Canadian citizen. Canada has chosen you and we have chosen to help you, and we want you to be successful here in Canada.
I'm putting myself in the place of somebody tortured. I'm used to being tortured. Now you want to help me. I have been living in all my life during war. How now do you want to help me? How can I react to you as somebody that wants to help me and not hurt me? That is the difficulty that many individuals face. Settlement in itself, even in the absence of trauma, even if you are not a refugee, you go through cultural shock, you go through the differences in way of life as you know it in your country of origin. So when you have these experiences of prolonged trauma, it adds layers to the difficulties and barriers that the clients are going to face to settle.
Try to find somebody in our congregation who understood what we were about and understood the culture and the language. Unfortunately, we didn't have anybody at the time this person came. Realizing that, we get a call from a sponsorship agreement holder and say, we've got an important case, we've got an urgency case, an Iranian transgendered woman, can you help? Of course we want to help. They're an LGBT, we want to help. Unfortunately, we didn't think it through far enough, I think, or we had hoped that maybe this person had a better English comprehension than they did, because if we had more planning, we would have been able to solicit more resources out in the community. Because of her hard life that she had been through, coming through the refugee system, that she just felt she couldn't trust anybody, no matter who it was.
Some of them have it very clear. Very, very clear. For some reason, they come to you and they say to you, why you want to send me to a psychiatrist? I'm not crazy. Crazy is the person that did this to me. That's the person that needs to go to a psychiatrist, not me. How do you work with it when you know that it's true? The other one is the one that did the abnormal, but this person is affected and needs help, because at the same time switches from that to being suicidal or to being extremely depressed. Well, you have to work it slowly, validate again, acknowledge, yes, you're right, but the reality is that he injures you, and that perhaps you need to look into those injuries. Just the way that you would look to injuries that you would receive in a traumatic accident, in a plane crash or in a car crash, right?
Even though we tried to do our best, we had a team of settlement volunteers working with her, able to bring her to appointments, making sure she went to appointments, but she got into a very depressed state in Canada. And the mental health facilities that we had placed her with, and she kept telling us that they were making progress, but because of the confidentiality between the doctor being able to share, we were not able to understand the depths of her depression, and she was unsuccessful.
There are particular worries: housing, job, training, registering the kids for school, worrying for the children, how they are adapting in the school, or maybe the person is not that worried about what happened to his own flesh and blood, but his own flesh and blood in the shape of a child that is still back home. There may be need to involve more sponsors to sponsor more members of the family, because you brought one person that was in immediate danger, but there's others also.
Supportive communities, access to job market, appropriate housing, sufficient income are all important factors that help refugees overcome their traumatic experience and actually promote their mental health.
Building a support network for the individual will help in stopping the deterioration of mental health. It's a big fact. So there are many people from that point of view then that are attending mental health without necessarily being a clinic. And anything that helps the person to have a social support network, having friends, relating to others, expanding their network of support. So expanding where the client can go is going to help a lot. The other one is employment, because what happens is they are usually unemployed, subemployed, and that is not going to help their mental health.
Sometimes, some symptoms could be misinterpreted. People understand mental health problems in a different way, explain their problems in a different way. So this is something that we need to be aware and open to those differences. What I would suggest is not to question people about their traumatic experiences if they are not ready to talk about that. This is actually something that could lead to re-traumatization. Again, it's okay to ask, but it's not okay to insist. Encouraging people who have mental health problems to seek help is important. So encouraging them to talk to their friends and family would be important. Encouraging them to talk to their family doctor or to maybe talk to their settlement counselor would be good. It is important to involve refugees in meaningful activities and have a structured life, meaning going to school or going to work, or even doing volunteer work. So that is really important, and that helps actually people cope with the trauma. Many people for a long period of time actually did not have a control over their life. So after coming to Canada as permanent residents, encouraging them to become active participants in their life is really important. That sense of empowerment is very important for their health and well-being. Helping them find a family doctor is very important, maybe accompanying them to those first appointments, but at the same time, respecting their privacy and confidentiality. Also be open to differences, because people from different cultural background have different norms, values and beliefs. In some cultures, openly talking about personal emotion and problems may not be culturally appropriate.
The sponsor shouldn't hesitate to recommend this help early, without making it sensationalistic. As early as you notice something, you clarify with the individual and you offer. And if the individual say no, you respect and take a step back If he commits suicide and you didn't know because he never disclosed anything to you, that inflicts a lot of guilt. The guilt is a tricky thing in trauma. It acts everywhere. It acts on the victim, it acts on the friends. It's not your fault, you're not a psychiatrist. How did you know that this guy was suicidal? Another one that is very subtle too, that should wake up the mind of the sponsor is, I don't want to live like that. This sensation of hopelessness and desperation should alert them. Definitely is something that they should come back to the individual and say, I'm feeling really, really worried for you. You have to be persistent if the person continues in that way, persistent and persistent. It's best if you do it in that way than waiting until the person has the suicidal.
We need to connect these types of people with some support community that can help them so that they're not alone. We've got to have more one-on-one interaction with the person, and they need to have a best friend, a best buddy, rather than relying on outside resources at work, a 9-to-5 day shift, for example, and you might have a crisis at 10 o'clock at night. Well, just somebody who speaks the person's language can talk them out of their crisis over the phone. All we can do is be their friend and say that we're available to you anytime you want, to help you in any way to help you settle. Some people are going to be stronger and be able to go on their own a lot earlier. Some people will need a year or two to settle into Canada.
Mental health problems do interfere with people's ability to learn new language. Attending classes that are specially designed for them may be helpful.
The motivation is the next case. The next case is going to be a successful case. The team that was responsible for the transgendered female, that team was very devastated at her not being successful. There are still some from that team who still volunteer in the settlement area because they know that the next case is the case that needs them.